Includes all operations of the emergency alert system. All stations may now resume regular programming.
For expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
About 2,400 years ago, the Greek philosopher Plato came up with the idea of constructing the state and society according to an elaborate plan. Plato wanted quote-unquote wise men, which were just considered philosophers, at the helm of the government. But he also made it clear that this kind of state would need to transform the human race. In modern times, the promoters of the omnipotent state, well, they want to substitute Plato's philosophers with the quote-unquote expert, and create the new man through eugenics, which is now just called transhumanism. The United Nations and its various sub-organizations play a pivotal role in this project, which has reached its present stage with Agenda 2030 and the Great Reset. The Great Reset did not come out of nowhere. The first modern attempts to create a global institution with a governmental function, well, it was launched by the government of Woodrow Wilson, who acted as U.S. President from 1913 to 1921. Under the inspiration of Colonel Mandell House, the President's prime advisor and best friend, Woodrow Wilson wanted to establish a world forum for the period after World War I. Yet the plan of American participation in the League of Nations failed, and the drive towards internationalism and establishing a new world order receded during the Roaring '20s. However, a new move towards managing a society like an organization came during the Great Depression. Franklin Roosevelt did not let the crisis go by without driving the agenda forward with his quote-unquote New Deal. FDR was especially interested in the special executive privileges that came with the Second World War. Resistance was almost nil when he moved forward to lay the groundwork for a new League of Nations, which is now just called the UN. Under the leadership of Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt, 26 nations agreed in January 1942. They agreed to the initiative of establishing a United Nations organization, which came into existence on October 24, 1945. Since its inception, the United Nations and its branches, such as the World Bank Group and the World Health Organization, have prepared the countries of the world to comply with the goals that were announced at its foundation. Yet the unctuous pronouncements of promoting international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, and working for social progress, better living standards, and human rights, well, it hides the agenda of establishing a world government with executive powers whose task would not be simply promoting liberty and free markets, but rather greater interventionism and control through cultural and scientific organizations. This became clear with the creation of the UN's educational, scientific, and cultural organization, which is called UNESCO. After the foundation of UNESCO in 1945, the English evolutionary biologist, eugenicist, and declared globalist Julian Huxley, yes, the brother of Aldous Huxley, the author of the prophetic Brave New World, well, Julian became its first director. At the launch of the organization, Huxley called for, and I quote, a scientific world humanism, global in extent, and he even asked to manipulate human evolution to a desirable end, referring to dialectical materialism as the first radical attempt at evolutionary philosophy. The director of UNESCO laments that the Marxist approach to changing society was bound to fail, simply because it lacks an indispensable biological component. With these ideas, Julian Huxley was in respectable company. Since the late 19th century, the call for the genetic betterment of the human race through eugenics has been gaining many prominent followers. John Maynard Keynes, for example, held the promotion of eugenics and population control as one of the most important social questions and crucial areas of research. And he was not alone. The list of advocates of breeding the human race for its own betterment is quite large and impressive, if that's even the right word to use. I'm not too sure about that. These illiberal reformers include, among many other well-known names, the writers H.G. Wells and G.B. Shaw, U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, as well as the economist Irving Fisher, And of course, the family planning pioneers Margaret Sanger and Bill Gates Sr. Yes, that's right, the father of Bill Gates, the Microsoft co-founder and head of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In his discourse at the foundation of UNESCO, Julian Huxley was quite specific about the goals and methods of this institution. To achieve the desired, and I quote, evolutionary progress of mankind, the first step must be to stress the ultimate need for world political unity and familiarize all people with the implications of the transfer of full sovereignty from separate nations to a world organization. Furthermore, the institution must consider the trade-off between, and I quote, the importance of quality as against quantity, which means that it must take into account that there is, and I quote again, an optimum range of size for every human organization, as for every type of organism. The educational, scientific, and cultural organization of the UN should give special attention to, and I quote, unity in the variety of the world's art and culture, as well as the promotion of one single pool of scientific knowledge. Julian Huxley makes it clear that human diversity is not for all. Variety for, again, I quote, weaklings, fools, and moral deficients cannot be anything but bad. And because a considerable percentage of the population is not capable of profiting from higher education, he also went on to say, a considerable percentage of young men suffer from physical weakness or mental instability, and these grounds are often genetic in origin. Of course, he means that these groups must be excluded from the efforts of advancing human progress. In his discourse, Huxley diagnosed that at the time of his writing, the indirect effect of civilization is rather dysgenic instead of eugenic, and that in any case, it seems likely that the dead weight of genetic stupidity, physical weakness, mental instability, and disease proneness, which already exist in the human species, will prove too great a burden for real progress to be achieved. After all, and I quote, it is essential that eugenics be brought entirely within the borders of science, for as already indicated, in the not very remote future, the problem of improving the average quality of human beings is likely to become urgent, and this can only be accomplished by applying the findings of a truly scientific eugenics. Now, from there, the next decisive step towards global economic transformation was taken with the first report of the Club of Rome. In 1968, the Club of Rome was initiated at the Rockefeller Estate in Bellagio, Italy. Its first report was published in 1972 under the title The Limits to Growth, which we have talked a lot about. The President Emeritus of the Club of Rome, Alexander King, and the Secretary of the Club, General Bertrand Schneider, inform in their report of the Council of the Club of Rome that when the members of the club were in search of identifying a new enemy, they listed pollution, global warming, water shortages, and famines as the most opportune items to be blamed on humanity, with the implication that humanity itself must be reduced to keep these threats in check. In fact, this is a clip of one of the founding members of the Club of Rome, Dennis Meadows. Let's hear what he has to say regarding depopulation.
But in one way or another, we are so far, globally, we are so far above the population and the consumption levels which can be supported by this planet that I know in one way or another it's going to come back down. So I don't hope to avoid that. I hope that it can occur in a civil way, and I mean civil in a special way, peaceful. Peace doesn't mean that everybody's happy, but it means that conflict isn't solved through violence, through force, but rather in other ways. And so that's what I hope for. That we can, I mean, the planet can support something like 1 billion people, maybe 2 billion, depending on how much liberty and how much material consumption you want to have. If you want more liberty and more consumption, you have to have fewer people. And conversely, you can have more people. I mean, we could even have 8 or 9 billion probably if we have a very strong dictatorship, which is smart. That's unfortunately you never have smart dictatorships. They're always stupid. So, but if you had a smart dictatorship and a low standard of living, you can have it. But we want to have freedom and we want to have a high sentence, so we're going to have 1 billion people. And we're now at 7, so we have to get back down. I hope that this can be slow, relatively slow, and that it can be done in a way which is relatively equal, so that people share the experience and you don't have a few rich, trying to force everybody else to deal with it. So those are my hopes. I mean, these are pretty pessimistic hopes, but I mean, that's what lies ahead.
Well, I mean, what can you say? They are all insane. Anyway, since the 1990s, several comprehensive initiatives towards a global system of control have been undertaken by the UN with Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 was adopted by all UN member states in 2015. It launched its blueprint for global change with the call to achieve 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are known as SDGs. The key concept is sustainable development. This includes population control as a crucial instrument. In 1945, Julian Huxley noted that it was too early to propose outright a eugenic depopulation program, but advised that it will be important to the organization, and I quote, "to see that the eugenic problem is examined with the greatest care, and that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake, so that much that now is unthinkable may at least become thinkable." Julian Huxley's caution is no longer necessary though. In the meantime, the branches of the UN have gained such a level of power that even originally minor UN sub-organizations such as the WHO have been enabled to command individual governments from around the world to obey their orders. The WHO and the International Monetary Fund, whose conditionality for loans has changed from fiscal restraint to the degree to which a country follows the rules set by the WHO, well, they have become a supreme tandem to work towards establishing a new world order. As Julian Huxley pointed out in his discourse in 1945, it is the task of the UN to do away with economic freedom because, and I quote, "laissez-faire and capitalist economic systems have created a great deal of ugliness. The time has come to work towards the emergence of a single world culture," he said. "This must be done with the explicit help of the mass media and the educational system." With the foundation of the UN and its sub-organizations, the drive to advance the programs of eugenics and transhumanism, well, they took a big step forward. Together with the activities of the Club of Rome, they have set the stage to initiate the Great Reset that is currently ongoing. With the pronouncement of a pandemic, the goal of comprehensive government control of not just the economy, but society as a whole, well, it has taken another leap towards transforming everything. Freedom faces a new enemy. The tyranny comes under the guise of expert rule and benevolent dictatorship. The new rulers do not justify their dominance because of divine providence, but now the tactic is to claim the right to rule the people in the name of universal health and safety based upon presumed scientific evidence. Do not let their talking points and manipulation distract you from the truth. While they push out this view of the need to have a benevolent dictator, just know that there is no such thing. Any dictatorship is inherently malevolent, and it's not like I even need to tell you that. It seems like common sense, doesn't it? Anyway, once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to, and if you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. Make sure to check out Alt Media too. Anyway, as usual, make sure you disobey those true fascistas. And of course, I hope you have a good night.